This is the Low Level Hell Podcast, Episode 12.
Delta 6, go centric. I got your back, man. Getting forces on the ground, you are clear to
Hostile intent.
Fire, take a fire.
IED in placers.
Flight 6, League 6, fire coming from this mark. Have him come around, pick over trail. We take a fire from 4 different places. That was quite a bit of fire there.
Wall of death heading east, going low level.
Welcome to the Low Level Hell Podcast, the program that explores the world of rotary and fixed-wing combat aviation through the exciting stories of the men and women who experienced it firsthand. Now, here's your host, U.S. Army helicopter pilot, Brian Harris.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Appreciate you stopping by. My name is Brian. I've got Kelly with me here today. What's going on, man?
Hey, not much. Just another day in paradise.
Yep, getting a little bit warmer down there in Texas after your snowpocalypse.
Yeah, no kidding. You know, Texas was not built for snow, and especially South Texas. So, losing power and water, and a lot of people had busted pipes, and we had no water for a couple of days. And I tell you what, you really start thinking about the necessities of life when you don't have power and water. People really go crazy around here too. So, yep, very, very glad to get back to normal.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't have too much damage. I have a friend of mine that still lives there. I guess their house was fine, but his wife works or maybe owns now a veterinarian clinic, and they had a bunch of pipes burst. He sent me some pictures. It was not pretty.
Yeah, at one time, my town here in New Braunfels was pumping 28 million gallons a day, and nobody had water pressure. So that tells you it was just running out in some open pipe somewhere, you know?
Yeah, wow, that's a good point. Well, from one tragedy to another, going back to work full time, which I know I shouldn't say it that way because it's a great thing. You know, it's good that we're getting back to normal, but at the same time, after not having to go in for the past year, and now having to start going back in every day, it's painful.
Yep, I'm not looking forward to it at all. It's been, I think, a year and 2 weeks since I came home to start teleworking full time, and I've loved it. You know, I'm when I'm in the office, I got people lined out the door wanting to talk. It's in meetings, it's just brutal, right? Yeah. And by the time you get home, it's just like you're worn out, and sometimes in a bad mood. And then, a year ago, we got sent home basically. And it's been a joy. You know, I've got 5 kids, and just to be able to and one really small one, 1 year old. And it's been really good to, be home to enjoy that and see her a lot more than I did the other 4. Yeah. But at the same time, it's very hard to concentrate in calls, and talking to important people when you got, a 1 year old trying to run around or sit in your lap at the same time. So I'm going to miss that. But, in some regards, I need to get back into the swing of probably paying attention, a little bit more than I have been. But I'm not looking forward to it, but I'm looking forward to it all at the same time. Yeah,
it's hard going back to being an adult is kind of how I picture it. 'Cause I spend way too much time not adulting. But it's funny because even my kids, so they started going back to school this past Monday, and they go two days a week. So they go Monday, Tuesday, then Wednesday the school is getting cleaned. And then Thursday, Friday, they do virtual, and it's like half and half, right? So half the school does that, and the other half does the other half. So they're going to class, and there's 4 kids in their classroom or something, and then the rest are on the computer. But then they popped up here this week and said, hey, after spring break, we're going to go back to coming back to school 4 times a week, and Wednesdays will be virtual because they're going to again clean it. Right. But you have the option of staying virtual for the rest of the year. Yep. And so we asked the kids, are you sure, do you want to go to school, or do you just want to stay virtual? Because in our mind, we're kind of like, well, they got to get up a little bit earlier, which means we got to get up a little bit earlier. They're probably going to
How much work is it for me?
It's 5 weeks, it'd be okay. And every single one of them was like, no, I want to go back. So, that's pretty wild to me that 4 kids, 4 out of 4.
It's the social aspect. Yeah. And that's what my kids deal with, because they're still teleworking as well. And, they want to go hang out with their friends. And I'm like, no, they got COVID, right. So you can't do that yet, and this is just my personal side. I'm not I'm not a disbeliever in the vaccination, but I certainly am waiting it out, right? I'll probably have to take it sooner or later, or be forced to eventually, but I like to wait as long as I can. So, none of us have been really vaccinated, but so they want to go back to school, and at some point, as a parent, you have to make the decision, okay, this is probably not going away. Yeah. We're probably all going to get it sooner or later. How, what damage are we doing to the kids by them not having a social life or them just staying at home? So it's a hard trade-off when you're a parent to think about those kind of things. But, you just you try to make the best decision and knowledge as you can, and then you go from there. I don't think my kids will go back the rest of the year because, it's pretty close to being over after spring break, right? A couple of months. But next year, certainly, it'll probably be back in full swing, and they're looking forward to it, and so is my wife.
Yeah. And, for the vaccine, I can tell you that I got it and the tentacles are barely noticeable. So I really wouldn't worry too much about getting it. It's going to be fine.
You haven't turned into a zombie yet, right?
Yeah, not quite yet. It's that third eye that's a little bit disconcerting for strangers.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, let's say thanks to a few people. We've got our Patreon set up and we've had quite a few new people join. So I want to say thanks to them. We'll start with our Air Mission Commander tiers. It's the highest tier. We had a new one today. It goes by Prime. We got JG4 Kruger, Dean Larson, and Ken Kessner. So appreciate you guys. For our wingmen, we have Apache Can't Fly, which is not true. It can fly. I've seen it. I've been in it. Rocket Phil, CM, Steve Davey, Mike Detloff, Sean Sterling, Loki Jew, Terminus, and Rob Grady. For our mission pilots, Sirius, and for our crew chiefs, Caden Jambeer. So I appreciate all of you and your support. And of course, for the rest of you, if you'd like to support, you can check out our Patreon. Just go to our website, www.thelowlevelhellpodcast.com. And it's got links to our Facebook, our Instagram, Twitter, Patreon, as well as our new photo album where we're showing pictures from our guests. But of course, just to support the show, it really doesn't cost you a dime. You can just scroll on down to the bottom there and leave a comment and a rating. Statistically speaking, based on the analytics, greater than 90% of you are listening on Apple. So very easily, you can just go ahead and look at your screen right now. Just scroll on down there. It's got 5 little stars. You're going to hit the 5th one there for me. And then just go ahead and leave a comment. And I do want to thank the people who have done this. It's pretty awesome that people will take the time and do that. And there's been some really, really nice comments left. In fact, from someone I guess that worked for me, because they said they worked for me at some point. I don't know who they are, but they had some nice things to say. So I appreciate it, and checks in the mail. Well, with all of that, I guess we'll go ahead and roll into this week's interview. I had a great time with this one, and I think all of you are really going to enjoy hearing this as well. So we'll see you on the other side. All right, well, today we're joined by Greg Coker. He's a former AH-1 Cobra pilot, AH-64 Apache pilot, and I guess most notably a AH-6 Little Bird pilot. He's also the author of a new book, Death Waits in the Dark, Six Guns Don't Miss, which was just published here, past the last December, is that right?
Yes, sir. Yes,
right.
sir.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, Greg, and sharing some time with us here. We were just kind of goofing around. We know a few of the same people. I'm sure there's probably some other names in there we could bounce off each other. But just for people who don't know anything about you, haven't read your book or anything like that, just tell us a little bit about you and where you're from and kind of how you got started in aviation.
Sure. Well, thanks, Brian, for having me on, and it's an honor. And I love talking about what I've done in the past, and hopefully it'll help other folks, if they're thinking about moving up in their career, or coming in the Army and being an aviator, or whatever you choose.
So where'd you grow up, and when did you join the Army?
Well, I've never grown up, I guess, but my dad, you'll see.
Well, what is that? They say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And say, I want to be a pilot, and says, well, you can't do both or something. Yeah,
we're little boys in men's bodies and trying to find our way through this journey that we take. But now my father was in the military. He was in the Air Force. And I was born in California. He was stationed out there, and then moved around a bit, and then wound up in central Illinois there for probably about 10 years. And I graduated high school and left and came back down to Texas and North Louisiana. I had kinfolk there, my grandmother and uncle, and worked on ranch and goodness gracious, rodeoed and cowboyed and worked in the oil field. And, at 18, 19, 20, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do at that time. Of course, my father had talked to me about the military for quite some time, and it was something that interested me. And as I grew up in the 60s and 70s as a kid, of course, two of the three channels that we had back then were usually the Vietnam War or news footage. And being the first helicopter war, I just, as a young man, I got, I guess, infatuated with those helicopters and watching them fly and land, take off. But being around, a parent in the Air Force, of course, we're always around airfields and watching jets take off and land. And so, yeah, I was always drawn to flight, I guess you could say. And and I knew I wanted to fly, and that's what I kept working towards or striving to. And the vehicle at the time when I started to get serious about joining the Army was at the Warrant Officer program. And I didn't have a degree at the time, so, that was really my only choice. And so I enlisted in the Army first. My dad recommended that I do that. And, I went to Fort Campbell, 327th Infantry, 1st Brigade, and 3 years there. And as I was, so it was, and still is, it's a process to fill out all your paperwork to get it pushed up and to the selection board. And I can remember telling my commander one day, I said, I think, sir, that they do this process by design, because a lot of guys just give up because it's a lot of hard work.
It is.
And plus you've got a job in the Army and trying to manage all that stuff. So
no, I agree. I've said similar things before too. Like they're just trying to weed out the weak, to see if you actually want it.
Yeah, we'll see how bad this guy wants it. So it's part of the process. And it's process and everything that, we do in the military. So
So you did 3 years in the infantry and then got into flight school?
Yes. Yeah, I got accepted, and I was older. I was 25 when I came into the Army. Just took me a little longer to figure out what I wanted to do. And so I was a little older, and of course, then it was, you had to be in flight school by the age 29 and a half. And, I was right there at the door, but I didn't make it, and went to Fort Rucker in March of 89 and graduated in March of 90. Yes. Yeah. Did basic, and I tracked guns. Everybody told me I was crazy, but I really liked shooting things and blowing things up. So that's the Cobra track. Apaches were just coming on, and so I tracked Cobras, and my first tour I left and went to Korea in the 517 Air Cavalry. And what a great, great place for a W1 to start flying. We had all the, different terrains. You had mountains, you had snow, you had over water, you had urban. And it was, at the time, it was a real world mission. So we were the furthest unit deployed north for aviation. It was a armor was part of it there at Gary Ellen, and we were at Camp Mobile in the Cobras and the Scouts.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I was there as an armor guy. There at Camp Casey's. That was right across the street from Camp Mobile.
I'll be darned.
Yeah. In fact, I think when I went through, they didn't have any aircraft there. That was like the transition point where guys were coming into the second ID, and then all the aviation was up north. What was that? Can't even remember the name of it, but it was even further north than there.
Oh wow!
But that was when they had 58s. This was 2001 was when I got there.
Gotcha.
But Okay. So when you did the Korea tour, well, let me back up. So flight school, you said when you tracked guns back then, you had to go Cobras. They didn't have Apache training going on there. It was all like unit
No,
level, or how'd that work?
no, it was the Army was in a transition period from going Cobras to Apache. And I think, the only units, I think the 101st, the 82nd, and I believe a unit at Fort Hood, maybe 1st Cav.
Yeah, probably.
I don't recall, but yeah, and they had taken those folks and they'd gone as a complete cohesive unit, done their training in Hood and, the other places, and then turned in Cobras and got Apaches. And,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Yes, sir.
And so then you went to Korea, just a 1 year tour doing the Cobra thing there.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. So I mean, you're right. Korea is a pretty complicated environment. I've never flown there, but spent some time on the ground there, and I can just imagine.
Sure.
And I've talked to other people there, but I mean, yeah, it sounds pretty amazing. Plus, two, you're having to deal with the airspace. Of course, I don't know how it was back then, but now you're dealing with another country's airspace as well. I'm sure that was adventurous.
Yeah, it was. You had to stay on your toes, and I mean, for me, I wanted to be the best Cobra pilot in the Army, and I just stuck my nose in the books and got good at my trade. And I found out real early that if you wanted to fly more, you become friends with the maintenance test pilot. Because they're, and it's cool taking a Cobra up to 10,000 feet over, and you can look out and see North Korea and do a teak check and then come on down. But you learn to fly the aircraft. But yeah, I was always begging rides with those guys, and they were always looking for somebody to put in a front seat. So.
Yeah, I think that's the trick that all young pilots eventually learn is get buddies with the MTP, because they're always going to need somebody to sandbag for them. So that's true.
Yes.
Lord knows W1 Harris coming out of flight school spent a lot of time sandbagging and holding a checklist. So.
Oh yes, yeah, Apaches too. I did the same thing, and we shot a lot. We went to the range and we trained, and we had a real world mission. Of course, we flew the border. And flew a lot of night vision goggles, so that paid off, helping me at a later time for when I assessed. And my IP came in, and I never will forget this. He goes, "Hey," he says, "I put me in the commander, put you up for your PC ride." I said, "Excuse me, I just got here." And he says, "Well, you're at 23.5 hours.
Wow.
And you have to have 25 hours to be a pilot in command." And his name's Kevin Detlefson, W2 at the time. He retired as a W5, but I argued with it. He goes, "Oh," he says, we put you up. It's going to happen. So get in the books. Well,
wow.
I guess it goes across the desk of the, I believe, 8th Army in Seoul. And I never will forget this guy. They called him the Hammer. His name was Mr. Manijesik, W4. He was the SP for 8th Army. But so he saw this 23.5 hour W1, and it's like, I'm going to have to go fly with this young man.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I did. It was a 3-day check ride, but man, oh man, I learned so much in, flying with him, and I passed my check ride. So
he came down there to nurture you, though, right? He didn't come down there solely to bust your balls.
No. But I mean, that guy put me through the ringer, and we flew front seat, back seat, MVG, and but it was cool the last day. I think he said he had done 3 tours in Vietnam flying Cobras, but man, that guy, he had so much knowledge, and I felt, that, man, this is cool because I get to fly with the old guys, right. But that last day, that last afternoon, he says, "Okay," he says, "ride's over. I had the controls." I said, "Roger that." And man, he taught me how to fly that machine.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I'm chuckling thinking about that 25 hours in your primary airframe to be looked at for pilot command. I mean,
Yeah, I was scared to death.
yeah, I mean, I was hundreds of hours, and that was the average, when I got first looked at for PC. But I guess
Yeah.
in Korea too, considering that it's really only a 1-year tour, generally speaking, they
Yeah,
kind of have to.
it's a fast track.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's good for you then. I mean, that's great
Yes,
experience.
sir. Yeah, and I was older. I was
Sure.
30. I was 30 years old, so it wasn't like I was a
Yeah.
young 20s W1. So plus I'd had some time in the Army and had a little bit of responsibility, I guess
Yeah.
you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gave the illusion of maturity, and sometimes that's all that matters.
Yes.
So.
Yes, sir. Yes,
All right.
sir.
Cool. So you finished up there, and then you went to Campbell and transitioned to Apaches with the 101st.
Yes, sir. Yeah, first 101st, old Ugly Eddie.
So how was that transition to go from something like the Cobra to the Apache? Because there's a lot of different kind of widgets going on in there.
Yeah, it was, man, there's a lot more switchology, and my stick buddy down there was a fellow named Bruce Irwin, and oh my gosh, and he had just come back from Korea too. We had met. He was in Half Attack, I believe, but we had met, knew each other. It's a small community, small world. And yeah, our poor IP, we just wore him out every day. And but yeah, the switchology was it was just a whole different. You had 2 engines now, and front seat was a busy seat. And I don't remember, but there were close to 100 switch positions just to send a Hellfire, and then flying the bag. Boy, that was funny the first time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's something universal that all Apache guys can relate to is the bag.
Yes. Yeah. Sitting there on the bleachers watching your buddies go the wrong traffic pattern. Of course, the IPs are just laughing at us. And,
oh, yeah.
You get it. You get it after a while. But
yeah,
it was different.
I think it appears scarier than it really is. You do it the first time, it's just weird feeling, right? Your body just has a hard time adjusting. But the second or third time, it's not so bad. But when I tell people particularly people who aren't even pilots, and I tell them about the bag, their jaw drops. They're like, "What? Like you do?
Yeah.
How?"
Yeah. Yes.
Because it does sound insane. Like, no, yeah, you get in the thing and this, it's covered up, and they're like, "Well, what do you mean you taxi out like that?" Like, "Oh yeah, the whole flight,
the whole flight."
Yeah, and then just like you said, the switchology. I've never flown an alpha model, but I've talked to guys who they would tell me about was it the ORT? We had the TDAC, but you guys had to like put your face up to something in there.
Oh yes,
do all these blind drills and know all the buttons and switches and everything.
Yeah. You had to get. It was similar to the Cobra.
Okay.
You had a heads down display. I think it was a TSU in the Cobra, and I can't recall what it was.
Yeah, it's been a while, right? No worries.
Yeah, the new guys, we'd take Kiwi shoe polish, and especially lieutenants, and we'd put it around the eyepiece. Yeah. And they're like, "All right, go heads down. Track that car right there." And they'd come back, and everybody's standing there, just got that black circle around his face.
That's pretty good.
The things we used to do.
Oh yeah, and those things like that continue on, just different versions for sure.
Sure.
So how long were you in the 101st flying Apaches?
Just 3 years before I assessed. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep, 3 years, and I knew about. Well, I didn't know a whole lot when I was enlisted, other than I'd see the little black helicopters flying around. Mm-hmm. Platoon sergeant tell us quit looking at them. They don't exist.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So to kind of frame this timeline, then you got to Campbell around 91, 92?
91.
91.
Yes,
okay. And
March 91.
Okay. So about 3 years there. So yeah, you're in the 101st, which I've spent very little time at Campbell, probably a week of my life. But as I recall, you guys were kind of separated. The 101st and the 160th guys shared the same airfield, right? But they were just across the street kind of way.
Right.
So you're growing up, you're seeing these guys over there, you're seeing the little helicopters doing stuff. And of course, the Black Hawk Down situation occurred.
Yes.
So, I mean, how much of that influenced your decision to go 160s, or was this something that you knew from the beginning that you wanted to do?
I knew from the beginning that's what I wanted to do. Yes. Okay. And I had a couple buddies from First Bat that had gone to B Company, Jamie Weeks, Greg Gilman, and, I'd still talk to them every now and then. They had, of course, they're in Green Platoon. Then I was right behind them. Mm-hmm. I started in like middle of 93. Yes. Green Platoon. Mm. Yep.
And Green Platoon is, for those listening, that's the training platoon where you show up and you're learning the basics of basically how to be a Night Stalker, not just the flying, but all the other stuff that comes with it.
Yes, absolutely. It's the first 3 weeks is all groundwork. It's firearms training, pistol, rifle, and you do CQB, so hand-to-hand, close quarters combat, do some land nav, and then the warrants and the commissioned officers, you go off to your track, and the enlisted guys go even longer. So depending on, they even have more. And then, ours, the gun side of it lasts about 6 months, I believe, 6-7 months. Yeah, because we have the lift guys is a little bit shorter, and then we've got gunnery, so that adds another probably a month to it.
Yeah, and you see that replicated just in the conventional Army, right, with flight school, where the lift guys, their Black Hawk or Chinook course might be 2 months or however long it is, but the Apache and a 58 course before it were, 4 months or so.
Yes.
Just because you got to add in all those other systems and shooting and everything. So
you bet.
Okay. So for those listening who may not kind of understand, I mean, what is the 160th, and just talk a little bit briefly about what that organization is and who it supports.
You bet. 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, airborne, and we're known as the Night Stalkers. And they started in 1981 after the failed Desert One mission in 1980. And Sergeant Charlie Beckwith, when they came back, and it's a lot of interesting history. And Colonel Beckwith was a commander of Delta. He says, I want Army aviators flying my guys. So,
right, because in Desert One, it was what, Marines and Air Force? It was everybody.
Navy, Marine, Air Force. It was a mishmash of folks. Army, of course, but so it was lessons learned, and the big one was don't hover around in the Farp in brownout conditions. So the unit was formed, and the guys were taken from the 101st, and they, still at the time, 1981, there were, there were several Vietnam vets still flying. And of course they took the Cobra guys, put them in the AH-6, and the Black Hawk was just coming on. So they took, Black Hawk guys and Huey guys and put them in the Hawks. Mm-hmm. So that was the original foundation of TF-160. And then they actually did a train up to go back to Iran. And then President Reagan was elected and the hostages were freed not long after. And then the unit continued to grow and train. And they just, and looking back and they still do today, but they're somewhat of a test and evaluation for all of aviation and DOD, not only the Army, but the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force. And I mean, they're on the cutting edge of technology. Sure. And, they figure these things out. Unfortunately, a lot of Night Stalkers were killed in training, trying to establish these techniques and flight parameters and, wearing cutout PVS-5 night vision goggles and, focusing one tube in the cockpit, focus the other tube outside the cockpit. And, they doggone, they just learn by trial and error, bless their heart. So every time I talk to one of the old guys, I thank him and hug him and say, hey, thanks for making my generation. I was somewhat of the second generation in the 90s there. And, but doggone, man, they were, they cut the cloth and made the trail for us to be better than they were. And I hope that, the next generation that came on after me and my generation, we made it better for them. So, I mean, we were continuously learning new things, even after 9/11 and Afghanistan, Iraq, and all the other places. Garden spots that we find.
I was going to say, it's an interesting point that you bring up that it is sort of a test bed of things. In fact, I was at work today. I was talking to a special forces guy that works in my office, and I don't know, for some reason we started talking about hearing protection, and I said, well, when I deployed, we know some of the same people, and I had a squadron commander who was a 160th guy, and he knew about equipment that you guys had access to, and it was like, oh, it'd be cool if we had it too. And so we had different body armor, we had different hear through stuff for our helmets. Yes. It was all these things that, of course, had been developed through the 160th, and it just kind of permeates its way out to the regular Army eventually.
Yeah, you bet. And it's, uniforms and gear and kit and, like you said, body armor and survival gear, ALSI, so aviation life support equipment. Just all kind of, I can't remember how many generations of plates that, we went through. Do we want them to float? Do we want them not to float? Do we want them thick? Do we want them thin? So you just have to put the stuff on and go test it and go fly it. And I remember when we got new seats, and we always have to wear our kit, our vest has soft armor and then plates front and back. And when we shoot, it's SOP. And it's just a safety thing. But one of the guys, they got in the aircraft in these new seats. They took the old green, what were those things?
Oh, like called? The webbing seats or whatever?
Yeah. The old webbing seats. Yeah. And I loved those things. They were comfortable, and you got air kind of blown up through different parts of your body to cool you off. But they had these foam seats. Well, they get in, they crank up, and he picks up to a hover, and he's sitting further forward because of this new seat pushing forward. And he almost, couldn't control the aircraft, but because he ran out of cyclic, it was all the way against his armor and his kit. And so he got set down, and they got out, shut down. We're like, okay, let's pull the backs out, because they were just Velcroed in. Yeah. So we had to pull the back seat out, the back of the seat out. And it was crazy. But, that's how you learn things.
That's funny that you reminded me. I did the exact same thing flying 58s. I'm pretty tall. I'm 6'4". So,
oh my goodness,
I could barely fit in the thing.
Squeeze.
Yeah, exactly. My knees were up on the dash. Yeah. But I did the same thing. I don't think I ever flew with a back plate on. And I certainly took the back out because, you just would run out of cyclic, and there's no going back at that point. So
no, it's like, what do I do now? Oh, push the collective down.
Yeah, exactly. Hope you got some room to run it on.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Sir. Yes, sir.
So what was that like? You're going from an Apache, which is a pretty big bird, to now you're going to something literally called the Little Bird. I mean, what was that transition like?
Man, it was. I was excited, to say the least, and that thing, that little helicopter is like, when I tell people, I said it's like a Ferrari. That thing will turn on a dime, give you 9 cents change, get back faster in a hot check. That's just an old calf roping saying we used to say about horses. But I've ridden all my life. But yeah, it's a great machine. And when Mr. Hughes engineered, developed, and built that helicopter, he wanted it to be as survivable as possible. And I don't know if you've ever read any of the history of it or Mr. Hughes, but it's really interesting. And, in Vietnam, the C models, the little Loaches, AH-6, doggone, it saved so many guys' lives. And I've met, several guys over the years that they're like, yeah, man, I love that helicopter. Yeah, we'd get shot down. They'd roll end over end like an egg, and we'd get out, and Cobra would come in, pick us up or whatever, and we'd go get another one. So,
yeah, I mean, it's an impressive little machine when you see it fully loaded up with stuff. It's just got guns and rockets hanging off of it. I mean, of course, everyone who sees it falls in love with that. But tell us a little bit about the armament and how it all plays out.
Yeah, the standard configuration was dual miniguns. So we have a plank that runs through the back of the cargo area. Mm-hmm. Okay. And on that plank, so we mount miniguns on the inboard and then 2 7-shot rocket pods on the outboards. And those are hinged so we can fold the rocket pod up, and then, we can load them on airplanes or whatever the case, or just to push them in the hangar and take up less room. So we carried the Dillon M134 miniguns. Our guns shot 4,000 rounds per minute, whereas the door guns and ground guns are at 3,000 rounds per minute.
Okay.
So that's, 2 guns, that's 133.3 bullets per second. So it's a lot of firepower in a very, very short time.
Yeah.
And, that was our standard configuration. Then the GAU came online. It's a 3-barreled 50 caliber Gatling gun that fires 1,000 rounds per minute. Did you guys ever carry the GAU or just the 50?
We got the GAU to test it out on the 58. I know a couple guys who here at Bragg. We did get them just to test out, but they ended up going with the M3P, which was a 50 cal they pulled off of the old Avenger trucks, I think.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah.
That thing had a high rate of fire too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was for the M3P, I think it was around 1,300.
Yes.
Whereas the old M2 was around 600 maybe.
650.
Yeah.
Yeah. Depending on how you set it.
Yeah.
But we never could. And we still had the old M250s, but we could never get those things to work.
Yeah.
They were. Yeah, and thank God for Mike Dillon. He's the one that took the minigun. He is a cool story, but make it short, he had bought a couple of miniguns. Of course, when you own a reloading company, you got to have a minigun so you can feed it.
Yeah.
Mike was just quite a character, and got to be very, very good friends with him and the family. And I actually worked for him for a while, and he re-engineered the feeder, and that was the weak link in the original GE gun. And he bought it, and it was interesting that it was like early 90s, and he said they took it to the range. Some guy from a magazine called him and says, "Hey, I'm going to bring a Corvette out. I want you to shoot it with this minigun." And of course, Mike was like, "Okay." And the gun wouldn't run, so they ran it back that night, and they worked on it all night long. And he was an amazing engineer and just a great, great fella. So he kind of paralleled the 160th and was working. They finally, about early 90s, they finally got together, and I never will forget. They're like, "Hey, we got to go to the range, and we're going to do some testing on minigun. This guy's coming in." And so we land, and we're up doing our safety brief and range brief, and walk back down to the aircraft, and there's these 2 legs with pointed toe cowboy boots and jeans sticking out from under my helicopter. and I just walk up and I just tap his bottom of his boot, and I go, "Hey, what are you doing down there?" And it was Mike, and he just he's always grinning. He looks, and he's got that gun tore apart, and he's putting a feeder on it. And he's like, "Howdy." He always said howdy. I said, "Hey, sir, I'm Greg." He says, "Well, I'm Mike." He says, "Hold on a minute. Let me finish putting this feeder on." I said, "Yes, sir." I knew who he was, and of course, Marty and some of the other guys were there putting feeders on guns. And the doggone things worked, man. They worked good, and they're still working today. So
for the rocket pods, I assume you had just the same, had the 2 zones. Did you guys have different zones where you could put in different types of rockets, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep. We could zone them just like, normal 19-shot or 7-shot on another aircraft. But yeah, we can carry 10-pound HEs, 17-pound HEs, flechettes, illums. Yeah, we can carry the whole. We weaponeer it for whatever the target is.
Sure.
So if the target, hey, we think there might be light armor. Okay, let's hang a GAL. So we could go with trips, which was a GAL 19, the 50 Gatling gun on the left side, and then a minigun rocket pod on the right side.
Okay.
So we could, cover a very large target array with that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, it's just getting in there, flying, and going shooting stuff. But you gotta, you're a gun guy, and you weaponeer that target for what you need.
Yeah, well, that's what's interesting about the Little Bird, because it does have all this, these great weapons and stuff. But in your book, and I can relate to this as a 58 guy. You're still putting the little marker on the dash, with a marker and just sighting it in with your eyeballs.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and that's it. It takes probably 18 to 24 months to. So when you're done with Green Platoon, you go to B Company as a BMT, basic mission trained, and then you start gunnery, and you do gunnery and more gunnery and more gunnery, and you shoot a lot. I mean, we shoot 3 or 4 days a week, and probably 8 to 10 loads, so 4 day, 4 night, or 5 day, or 4 day and 6 night, however they had it. But you land there with a stack of rockets and ammo. The first time I saw, I was like, holy cow, man, I've been in Cobras and Apaches and been to rain. I've never seen rockets stacked high as me sitting on a pad, I was like, man, this is going to be good. But yeah, and it takes you that long just because the helicopter is hard to fly. There's no hydraulics in it. It's a true seat of the pants type of airframe. And, like I said earlier, it's a little sports car, and you can yank it and bank it. And I mean, when 2 AHs are in the terminal areas engaging targets, it just looks like a fur ball, because guy shoots, breaks, -2 shoots and breaks, lead comes back around, shooting and breaking, and listening to the ground force if necessary for immediate reattack or target shift or whatever the case may be. But you set that grease pencil mark, and it's an Army issue black grease pencil. Everybody carries 2 or 3 on them, and but it's different from shooting with like a pistol or rifle where you have iron sights, you have a front sight, rear sight, and you can line those up. Well, your head is the rear sight, so to speak. And then, but it's just learning, where to put that pipper so that your first rounds are right on target every time. We have very, very high standards for shooting, and we shoot close to friendlies. And so, yeah, it just takes time for a guy to learn it. And you'll judge, mine was like 18 rivets up, and I'm left eye dominant. So it went, my grease pencil mark went over the inside of the left pedal. And I mean, some guys that have all kind of unique ways, some had a string, they measure it up and then over, and or a tape measure, and they measure it. But yeah, once you get it set, it's set. But you have to sit completely, same way in the seat every time you shoot. Yeah. If you move left, or if you move right, or if you scrunch down in the seat, or if you raise up in the seat, then it's going to put that your pipper off and where your rounds impact.
Yeah, and you definitely can't use somebody else's pipper, because you will.
No. But I mean, you do it enough. And there was one guy, he didn't even use a pipper. Yeah. He had his sight picture, and he could shoot the standard, and absolutely. But I liked my sight out there. And you'll put little stadia. I mean, every guy had his own what worked for him.
Yeah.
I always had like a vertical stadia at the 6 o'clock, and then one at 3 and one at 9. Mm-hmm. And I'm a shooter, so I just imagine that as a scope reticle.
Yeah. Okay.
It would help me. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Shot was off at a meter or whatever. I'd be like, oh, I'll put it there. The winds, or I had a crosswind or things like that. But yeah, it just takes a long time to teach you to shoot.
Yeah, that's again referencing people that we both know. That was one of the conversations when I was a squadron in the operations office. Was, hey, Brian, how much can we get some range time? Well,
Yeah.
sir, probably twice a year. Oh no, we got to do more than that. I'm used to shooting like 2 or 3 times a week, and
A week?
stacks of rockets. And I was like, well, sir, I can tell you right now that ain't happening.
Yeah.
There's no way. So yeah, I've definitely heard the stories of the amount of training, and yeah, those pippers. I was never a fan of them, probably because I didn't get to shoot enough.
Sure.
Because I was one of those guys. I was I sort of knew my sight picture, right? The circle of action technique. I just, the ground's not moving. That's where my rockets are going. And I feel like I was pretty decent, probably not the all standards, but yeah, practice makes perfect. And you guys definitely got a ton of it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And we have a different technique for shooting, but I think it's trickled out into the big Army. And I know it has in the Marine Corps, but, using the bump and pushing over at the top, you get in that steady state, and it's a good, stable platform, or, when you're closing in on a target to shoot rockets. And I mean, that's you got to be able to put that rocket in there first shot without any minigun or anything else. So.
Yeah. I think that's probably the fundamental difference, is that with you guys, it is that there's a guarantee, that first round's going to hit where you want. Whereas with us in the 58 world, it was, well, the first round's going to be fairly close, and then we'll work it in from there.
Yes.
And that's just kind of the nature of the business and the difference. But yeah, the bump, I mean, as a 58 guy, that's all we did for the most part was bump it. Not so much in the 64 when I went over there. It's just not the same type of platform. You could do it, but it just didn't feel as well.
You bet.
And you didn't need to, honestly, with a lot of the systems, particularly the gun.
Yeah, and you may see that ground force one time or get called to do a call for fire, and they don't know you and you don't know them, and that's one of the great things with the 160th and who we support, Army Special Operations, and those guys. And I mean, when I hear a guy's voice on the radio, I know exactly, hey, that's Mo, or that's Jack, or that's whoever, and Leon, and because you work together for years and years and years and train together. And it just makes a really good, tight, cohesive combat team.
Yeah.
And they trust us and we trust them. So it's when they do a call for fire and say, hey, they're 15 meters, they're like, what is that?
Yeah.
Seek cover.
Yeah. Typically we don't find ourselves in that type of situation where they're, in these extreme close-up situations. But like even in your book, you were talking about times of checking in with a guy and they're whispering because they're so close to the target that,
Yep.
It's wild.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Another thing that the Night Stalkers are particularly known for is the timing, right? So the 30 seconds plus or minus time on target. And for the listener, for the average Army, the conventional standard is plus or minus 3 minutes. And that means, okay, if something's supposed to happen at 2100, you got a 3-minute window either side. And I think most units strive for a lot tighter than that, but still that's a 6-minute window. But for you guys, I mean, 30 seconds plus or minus, that's a 1-minute window is the standard.
Yes, sir. And we live and die by that standard because there are people, the ground forces depending on us. And if it's a time driven mission, then, it has to be. And doggone, I've seen guys almost crash helicopters to get in the window.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, Lord, here we go. We're late. Got a headwind. Everybody's pulling the guts out to make that time, that TOT.
Yeah.
And, but again, and that's, Green Platoon, that's all you do. You plan, you brief, you fly and navigate. You plan, you brief, you fly and navigate. It's, 18, 19-hour days for several months. But that just... Green Platoon gives you a license to learn, so you meet the standard, you graduate, you go to the company, and then you start earning your master's and your doctorate level of navigating to the target. And green platoon, you have to get there plus or minus 30 seconds with a map, a compass, and a clock. No electronic navigation whatsoever. And you're held to that standard your entire time with the unit. And, we're always testing ourselves, and, we'll back nav a guy. We'll have a blank map, and you have to go out and draw the line on your map while flying, and then put the checkpoints in and put your time down. And it's just really good practice, and it's it pays off. I mean, I've been in combat in different places, and nothing worked, no GPS, so hey, guess what? And you're in the lead aircraft, and you got 12 helicopters behind you with assaulters and rangers, and you got to get there, man. I mean, you just do. So that's I try to explain to people it's a doctorate level of flying and shooting at the unit there, but you have to be able to navigate in every terrain possible: over water, mountains, desert, urban, you name it, man. You have to be an expert at that. Sure do.
Yeah, and we're not talking about small flights either. I mean, this could be full bag of gas essentially to get somewhere and do your business and then get out of there. And it's a long ass flight just to get there and make sure that you're there within that plus or minus.
Yes, sir. I've flown over 3 hours and hit the target, and then they'll have a jump fart somewhere and go get gas and get home or get to your next target. So
yeah, I was interested in kind of reading through your book, and you guys were talking about the different Farp techniques that you guys had tried.
Oh Lord, yes.
Some good, some not so great.
I'm glad I didn't have to try a few of them.
Yeah.
God bless those guys. And we think outside the box. We're like, okay, we got to get gas. How are we going to get this gas? So, yeah, and you'd be surprised at what some of the fellows have thought up over the years.
Oh, yeah, I can only imagine. But that kind of highlights something else that you just touched on a second ago, is the planning. And that's another thing that I've, I guess, fortunately been able to experience working with former 160th guys, is the level and detail of planning that you guys do. I mean, we did just a normal squadron gunnery, which generally speaking is, hey, here's the flight schedule, fly out to this place, pick up some rockets and guns and go shoot. And we go into this brief and there are slides, blown up on massive scale all the way around the room. Okay, this is where you're going to taxi out of. This is where you're going to take off. It's like, we know, like, this is our airfield, but it's everything mapped out to the gnat's ass.
Yes.
And that, of course, is just a holdover from what you guys do. But that's how you hit that standard. That's how you hit 30 seconds.
Right. Yeah, and it keeps people safe, and everybody knows the plan, and we're just. And even the ground force or other people that we work with are like, man, those Night Stalkers, they're the best planners in the world. They plan and plan. We just, eventually you run out of time. You have to execute, because we'd still be planning. I mean, contingencies and everything we do, every product, the route card, the time card, the freak card, the objective area is triple checked. So 3 people look at that thing before it as a final product. And then in Green Platoon, in your early time in B Company, and I know in A Company too, that's our sister company, they fly the AH-6 with the planks. And holy cow, I know for at least another year, you had to draw out on butcher paper the objective area by hand. So, and it was just to teach you to, learn that objective area, learn that target. And, it just instills it into you. And so, when you graduate and get to use a slide or, get to use a PowerPoint, you're like, whoo, all right, finally.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's butcher paper hung all over the walls of the briefing area. There's a time flow, and there's objective area, and your loads and freak card. And yeah, it's funny. It was fun.
So let's talk about life deployed. I mean, that's one thing I liked about your book, certainly, is, it wasn't just all, we flew over here and we shot at these dudes. It was, this was us showing up with nothing. And, we had some wood and we had to build stuff. And, You know,
Sure.
I think sometimes people maybe think, well, the special operations guys, they get stuff taken care of for them. But, you know, you're kind of
No.
like us in a lot of ways. You know, sometimes you just get the hand you're dealt and you're like, well, I guess we're going to have to make some stuff here. And it was kind of interesting to read that. And of course, the shenanigans that just happen to go on when you're deployed and living
Yeah.
austere like that.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. We're just Army dudes, and you know, a lot of the guys from B Company were former infantry guys or Rangers, Special Forces. So, you know, we get laughing and joking, and it's like, man, I feel like I'm back in the day, you know, digging a fighting position and setting up my poncho liner to get some sleep. But yeah, it's just, you do what you have to do to make the best out of the situation. And, you know, we're all type A personalities. So we just, you know, all we need is some guidance and we'll get the job done. And, but we're always focused on the mission for sure. For sure. Yeah. We, you know, live in hangar or live in the desert or doggone, I've lived everywhere, camped out, you know, under the helicopter. And yeah, but it's all part of the job. It's all part of the adventure.
Certainly. I think one of the coolest things, and I knew you guys did this, but I didn't have any practical knowledge of it. I just knew it just in theory. But in your book, you were talking about the early stage of Afghanistan of trying to get the little birds into the fight.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was such a long flight from wherever, you know, you guys were based out of and everything. And it wasn't a really practical way to do it. But you did the whole airland concept of pushing them in the back of the C-130s, finding a
Yes.
place to land, you know, drop them out of the back and go do business and then come back and I guess fold them back up and fly away on the C-130 again.
Yes, sir. That was almost every night, you know, once we got a mission set and, you know, to where we could set the conditions. Cause, you know, it was just fun to watch. And I was honored to be a part of that team. And as I really didn't want to be the fire sport officer on that trip, but you know, the commander of Delta had approached me, and my good friend Leon Hansen, he was the FSNCO for B Squadron. You know, he had asked me about it, and then of course my commander, and I said, okay, but I'm still an AH guy. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it was, you know, once, you know, General Daly, he worked hard and the staff worked hard. Everybody did to get us in the fight because we were chomping at the bit. They're like, turn us loose, put us in, coach.
Yeah.
we're ready to go. So yeah, we did, and when we did, it was game on for sure.
Well, that was kind of interesting too when you were as the fire support guy because you were overhead.
Yes.
An AC-130.
Yes.
And then I think you were also in a P3 a couple of times.
Correct.
I remember correctly. Yeah, I was fascinated when you were talking about how many AC-130s were up at a time.
Oh yeah.
I guess I'd never pictured it. I never really thought about it, I guess, but I never pictured, you know, multiple ones in the same area.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of fascinating to hear about as well.
Well, the only reason we can do that is because of the detailed planning that we do and fire support coordination measures. You know, you're a gun guy, and you know how much work's put into that plan, and you know, to keep fire assets out of each other's airspace,
right?
And, you know, so but yeah, it's all about detailed planning, and we plan and plan and plan until we have to execute. So
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and it was cool to watch. It absolutely was.
Yeah, I mean I know you would much rather be in the cockpit, you know, doing your thing, but I think in retrospect you probably look at that experience as pretty fondly as well because that's pretty unique.
Yeah, I was honored. I just truly was. It was, you know, several historical events, and I was so focused on my task and getting aircraft where they needed to be and making sure the route was clear for the Chinooks or, you know, whoever was coming in. And yeah, it was busy. It was busy.
Yeah, no doubt.
It was busy.
So one thing I did want to ask you, and hopefully, you know, I don't open any wounds here, but you know, you did talk in the beginning of your book about your good friend that you know, really just kind of I guess, suffered from demons, I guess you could
Yes.
say.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's not a unique thing, unfortunately.
No, it's not.
I guess, and I can understand, I've certainly lost friends that way as well. And, you never 100% know what's going on in people's minds. But of course,
No.
the things that, you have experienced, the things that I've experienced, just these parts of our lives that we've gone through, they not only take a toll, but they're so, what's the word I'm looking for? They're so important, right? So
Yes.
when you were doing that stuff, you knew every single day of what you were doing had meaning and purpose and value.
Absolutely.
And then you, right. And you had all that camaraderie, and you had part of a team, and then you leave that, and suddenly things don't seem to make as much sense anymore. You don't have the same, you have the friends, but it's not the same. You're not there.
No.
So for you, I mean, what do you think about that? Like, what are your thoughts? What are your comments to other people who are in that situation, who are maybe having a hard time with it?
You bet. And it's, and it goes back to the first soldier that ever fought on a battlefield. And I've done thousands of hours of research and study, and so I can better, just live and, have a good life, and to help other friends of mine that are going through those same things. But I think the first thing that hit me was, holy cow, now what am I, because you literally go from Mach 2 with your hair on fire to now what am I going to do? I had a plan when I retired, but again, it slowly creeps in that, you're, like you said, you have a mission, you have a focus, and you know what you're going to do, and you're with your bros, and now you're not, and that's gone. Literally overnight, boom, it's gone. And so, you want to contribute to society and take care of your family, and work hard and take care of the things that you need to. And then another phase, starts to creep in, and regardless of what you experienced in combat, it's there, and it's never going to go away. And a good friend of mine one time told me, he said, Greg, it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
And so I always thought about that. I did. Yeah. And you get frustrated. And of course, the classic and I don't like PTS. I call it, what did I call it? I named it something new. It's PCS, post combat stress, because that's specific to a soldier, to a warrior. And they're all different types of PTS. I mean, it could be a car accident. It could be, somebody that was abused as a child or raped, or, anything that can, and there are different lengths of time, how the brain and how that person deals with that traumatic experience.
Yeah.
Whereas you take a gun pilot or a combat aviator or an infantryman or a ranger, or, those guys are out there in gunfights, every day for us for years.
Yeah.
And it takes a toll on a human, and every man has a breaking point. I'm just here to tell you.
Yeah.
And, for what I did learn, the most crucial element of any of this is that you have to talk to somebody, because we as warriors, we push it down. We're driven men, and, it's on to the next one. I gotta make a living. I've got to take care of my family. I've got to contribute to society and do the best I can do. And sometimes those things overwhelm you, and the demons will overcome you. And if you let them, they'll win. So how can you stay in that fight is to go talk to somebody. I don't care who it is, pastor, wife, buddy, therapist, someone. Just go talk to them. Because I know Leon didn't do that with Leon, nobody had a clue. And all the guys that I know, nobody had a clue. they executed. So they lose hope, okay, and they have no loving God. I've studied all these friends of mine and other people that have taken their life, and that's the two things everybody had in common. Now they might have had God in their heart. I know Leon did, and I know several other guys that did at one time, but they lose hope, man, and then they're like, okay, that's it. I can't take the pain anymore. I can't get help. I can't. And then you throw in alcohol and you throw in prescription drugs, and man, it just compounds. And and I talk about it in the book. I've been there. I've been to those dark places and considered taking my life, and because but I still had God in my heart. And that's why I didn't. And I know that he had a purpose for me. So that's why I'm still here today.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. Understanding the difference between traumatic stress from an incident versus the compounding stress of combat, or something akin to combat, where you are switched on every single day. I mean, it becomes your normal. I mean, you can read the stories of in your book, and of course anyone who's been deployed and gone on multiple patrols or operations. Sure. It becomes your normal, but your normal is still the average person's oh crap day. Just you don't think about it anymore. I mean, I was telling somebody the other day about how I was telling my son, actually, he's 15, he just turned 15. And I think we were watching a movie, and a mortar attack or something happens. And I said, when I was in Missoula in 06, we would get that happen to us 3 times a week. Yes. And I said, it got to the point where I wouldn't even get out of bed, and he laughed at me, and I'm like, I'm serious. Like, it was just so commonplace that I didn't care anymore.
Yes.
And I know you guys operated in similar areas.
Yeah. I closed us down.
Oh, really?
Late. Yeah. I never will forget. I'm going to go off trail
go
here.
Ahead.
I had the last load. We had closed, and we're going back to Balad in a C-17. And we were sitting there, and I'm like, come on, you guys, let's go. And so I go up front, and I go, what? How come we're not leaving? And he goes, well, Tyre just called, and they're shooting mortars. I said, they're shooting mortars? Well, let's take off. Let's not sit here. They're probably shooting mortars at this big airplane.
Right.
Go. So he's like, called Tyre, and he says, hey, we're expediting now. We took off. I was like, knuckleheads, let's not sit here. Let's go. Funny.
Yeah, I had a similar situation. We were in Afghanistan, and we were in the Farp, and I mean, we had no gas left. And as we were sitting in the Farp and they came out to fuel us up, we saw a dust cloud kick off in the distance. And then the alarm went off. And so it was a rocket attack, and all the Farp kids ran away into the bunker, and we're on the radio calling the headquarters, like, you got to get them out here. We can go get these guys, which of course it was on a timer anyway, but it just kind of stuck there, like, damn it.
Yes. Yeah.
When were you in Missoula? What you said 06?
Oh, it in and out. Yeah. From 03 to 07.
Okay. Yeah. Cause I was there, I think we got there in July of 06. And then I left I got shot on Christmas Day in 06 in Missoula.
Oh,
and left there.
Yeah. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, but I do remember some little birds there. They would, you guys would occasionally come in, and we wouldn't even know you guys were there. Like, oh, you'd take off, and you'd see them sitting on the ramp. Like, oh, I guess they're here. Yeah. And then the next day, it'd be gone or something. But small world.
Yep, very small, small.
But to go back to the combat stress, and because we both, I think, can relate to that, because like I said, I was shot, but for you were shot down. And I don't want to go into that because I know you've talked about other places, and of course you've got the book and you go into great detail. But I think it's interesting to highlight that difference between the combat stress and then the traumatic stress of something that is very acute and very singularly, something that is unique to you. And I would imagine taking a missile in the engine is pretty unique.
Yes, yeah, and going back to where we began, and and I started thinking a lot and talking to doctors and experts and our physicians, our, flight surgeons and other unit doctors. And, and if you look at the look at the physiological effects of, and I've talked to other guys, ground guys and special operators and, more aviators, but I think it's more persistent with the pilots, the aviators, because there's a lot going on flying that machine. Not only do you have to fly the machine, but you have to have situational awareness. Am I going to take fire, or my engine going to quit? Is my, all these things. But if you look at that up and down cycle, and I know right now there's quite a few studies of that adrenaline and all those physiological effects that go on with a combat soldier, and it wears on you, man. It wears you out. It wears you down.
Well, and two, to go with what you mentioned before, we're also sort of wired not to talk about it, because you dare not say anything that's going to get you grounded.
No. Man, that's what kept me from saying anything to anyone at the unit, because one, I didn't want to get fired. I didn't want to lose my job, and I didn't want to get, a big crazy C branded on my forehead. And the docs chewed me out for days for, why didn't you, and it was, and I talk about it in the book, the doc, he saw it and realized. Of course, people around me saw it, but they didn't say anything. But yeah, it's just, I was just thankful for him and helped save me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a walking time bomb, man.
Yeah.
I was an angry human being. And then I'd go deploy again, another 100 days and come back and start all over.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you've hit the nail on the head, though. It's you've got to recognize it in yourself, and then you've got to take the steps. And that the real step is reaching out to somebody and having a real conversation, and not just, hey, everything's good. And if it's not, say it's not, because, and that's what I tell guys who I know who are starting in the pipeline of being a pilot. And I tell them, like, look, you're not going to want to say anything, regardless, whether it's a divorce, whether it's you got a boo-boo, whatever the case may be. But here, being on the tail end, and you certainly, having finished your career, I think we can both kind of attest to, yes, but there's a balance that you've got to find where, you don't want to complain about every little boo-boo that you get, but you certainly don't want to stay quiet forever, because it's not going to get any better.
No, it's not. And as well as I do, it's taboo for aviators. I mean, you're held under a microscope, and it's just like you said, oh no, I'm okay. I got a fracture in my collarbone. Oh no, I can fly, doc. I'm good.
Yeah.
Hey, I've been, I just got fragged by this B-70 rocket. I'm good. No, I can go. So, no TBI for me. My ears aren't ringing. What'd you say?
Yeah. My helmet wasn't split in half after that.
Yeah.
That hard landing.
Oh gosh, yes, yeah. That was silly. And that was just an example of, how we're raised. And I didn't want anybody to see that helmet, because if that thing made its way to any other places, it would have been bad for me. So, and I just wanted to get back in the saddle and do my job.
Yeah.
I loved my job. I liked shooting people, so bad people.
Yeah, as long as they're all bad, it's actually pretty good way to spend the war. And with that comes, of course, you don't want to let your guys to the left and right you down. And of course, coming from the organization you're coming from, there's not a lot of dudes. There's not a lot of guys just waiting in the wings to take your spot. I mean, if you go down, it's going to hurt.
Yeah, it's devastating to us. I think at that time there were maybe 23 or 24 of us in B Company.
Wow.
And not everybody was an FMQ. You have to be, back in early days, you had to be a fully mission qualified gun pilot to go into combat. But I mean, we got short, so we were putting senior BMQs for guys getting ready for an FMQ check ride. It was just, we just had to do it, because there's just, and that's across the regiment. I mean, always has been. We're always at like 50%, I think. Yeah. Oh goodness. Yeah. If a guy gets hurt, or if he's killed in action, it's devastating. It's devastating.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time and sharing your experiences with us.
Brian,
I want to encourage.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I want to encourage everyone to take a look at your book too. It's called Death Waits in the Dark, 6 Guns Don't Miss.
Yes, sir. Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I read it in 2 days. So it's a good read. It's interesting, and you get some insight not only into what you guys did in the regiment and of course in the 6 Guns, but just some insight into what goes on in the mind of soldiers overseas. And like I said, some of the shenanigans that go on, the Cobra that the guys had to kill before it jumped into your fart sack with you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I'm proud to say too, I donate 100% of my proceeds, and to date, I just sent another check off today, so I've been able to donate $20,000 to nonprofits that support veterans, first responders, and their families. Wow. So yeah, that's really cool. I'm just blessed for sure. And there's keep buying books, I keep donating. So
yeah.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Got a few of the hardback special editions left, and you can go to the website deathwaitsinthedark.com, and then of course Amazon. There's Audible, Kindle, and then the paperback there. Okay. So,
that's incredible. Yeah, definitely check it out. Like I said, there's some interesting kind of detail of the early days of Afghanistan, early days of Iraq. Of course, your shoot down story, and even a picture, strangely enough, of you being shot down. Is that?
Yes. Isn't that crazy?
Like, who's the guy that was taking pictures at that moment?
I know him. And I was like, why weren't you suppressing?
Right.
He's like, man, I was like, that's gravy. Threw his camera up and then got on his guns and went to suppressing the target.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy though?
It is, absolutely. I mean, I had to look at it multiple times. Like, this can't actually be a picture of him being shot down, but
yeah,
it is there.
We all carry those little plastic Kodaks, with the crank film, and we weren't supposed to, but we did anyway. Yeah. But that is kind of I don't know the heat but that first little streak is actually the missile streak, and then you see me, the little black dots on fire, and it's a pretty cool picture.
Yeah, it's definitely a good picture to have. The older you get, you can look back on.
I can look back at it and laugh about it now. It's like,
I guess so, but certainly at the time.
That day, boys, time to go to Vegas or Disneyland or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Well, thank you so much, Greg. I've appreciated the time that you've shared with me and with all the listeners, and I hope everyone definitely checks out your book, and you can continue to give to some great charities.
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you, Brian, very much. I really enjoyed it. It's a pleasure, an honor.
Well, I know we both know some people that we've served with along the way that have, lost their battles with their demons, and it's just a really tough nut to crack, trying to figure out, why and how you can prevent it, what you can do about it.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of, both of us have had deployments into a war zone. And, if you look around in the war zone, when you get there and you're going to the DFAC and you're checking it out, I mean, you're overwhelmed by 18 and 19-year-olds, right? They're walking around the chow hall, and they're all pretty wide-eyed, and they're kind of like, I don't know how I got here kind of thing. It's like, well, you signed up for it for one. But, you start thinking about that. And me, when I was deployed, I was like, 39, 38, whatever. And I can deal with things, right? Like I've come to the conclusion, and I've lived long enough to have some conflict resolution in my life, right? I've seen a lot of things, and I can deal with some of that stuff. Now, when you're talking like an 18 and 19-year-old who's coming out of high school and really hasn't seen or really tasted the world, and then what those guys had to go through or what they saw in the combat zone was literally core shaking to them, and it had them questioning a lot of things. And then they are overwhelmed with guilt, and they had really nobody to turn to, right? So one of the issues that we've had in the military is while in the middle of a war, we're concentrating on fighting. We're not concentrating on the people coming home and healing, right? Hey, you go R&R, go home, we'll see you when you get back in theater, and that's it. And we quickly learned, it took a few years, unfortunately, that when they go home, that's when they need support, right? That's when they need people checking up on them. And because people were coming home and, just getting hooked on things they shouldn't be hooked on, and dealing with a lot of grief, and didn't know how to deal with their anger. And these are young kids, right? Yeah. There wasn't a whole lot of mentors stateside. There was a lot on, I got to say, there was some good support in Iraq, right? Your buddies were there. Your officers were there trying to take care of you. And your senior NCOs were, but when you got home, everybody just kind of deserted, right? Everybody kind of went home, and you had nobody but your family who had no idea what you were going through, and nor could you tell them, right? It's just one of those things you don't want to talk about it because they would not understand it, and that leads to massive depression. And some of these young kids just did not know how to deal with that. And on the flip side of that, a lot of our veterans were injured overseas, and they would come home. And at the time, the VA was not a stellar organization for medical care, apparently. And instead of fixing problems, they give them a pill for something. Now that's, some of that's been fixed now. And, we're concentrating more on that. We're not in a war per se. So we're able to go back and do some lessons learned with that. And unfortunately, it's cost a lot of people their lives from being hooked on drugs and just looking for a way out. And for some of these young kids, the only way out for them was to take their own life. And that's very, very sad.
Yeah. I like the way that our guest framed it, talking about the experiences and dealing with the stress of a moment versus the stress over time. And you're right. A lot of these young kids, and it's not just a problem. We're not saying that it's a problem that plagues just the younger ones, because obviously the older guys have these problems too.
True.
I know a full bird colonel who, right as he retired, ended his life, and you're like, where did this come from? But at the same time, a lot of those seeds can be, implanted very early on, and you do see it with these kids. I remember my last trip into Iraq, riding on a C-130 up into northern Iraq, and all these young kids, it was their first deployment. They all throw on their body armor, and they're all they wide-eyed. And I just get on the plane. I'm not even putting my armor on. I got a helmet in my hand, and I just sit down and start taking a nap. And they're all looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, bro, it's not a thing. Like, if something happens, we're all going to die anyway because we're on this plane. But yeah, it's a huge problem. And Greg is absolutely correct in what he says is, you've got to not just have someone to talk to, but you really got to talk. There's too many of these times where it's somebody's, you're talking to them, but it's not the level of talk that they need to hear.
Right.
The support that's not there. Just saying hi and checking on somebody, it's a good thing, but it's not enough all the time. And the problem is you just don't know that. You don't know who needs more than that. And so if you are hurting and you are struggling, and you've got to, I know it's hard, but you've got to reach out to somebody and say that you're hurting. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in that. There really isn't.
No, and there are organizations out there that are full of people that have gone through very, very similar experiences, and those are the people you want to talk to. Yeah, I mean, you can go talk to your clergy, you can go talk to a Harvard counselor or whatever. They're not going to understand what you saw and what you did, right? You need to talk to somebody who's a veteran, who's been through it, and who's there to help, because that's a huge difference in the therapy that type of issues need. So yeah,
and I think anything that can crack the ice. I'm not ashamed to say that I saw a therapist, not for any suicidal things, but I was just getting to a point where I was just overly frustrated and angry about stuff, and work was driving me nuts. And the day I finally decided to throw my iPhone through my car windshield was the day that I was like, maybe I should talk to somebody. Which never try to tell the guy fixing your windshield that you did something different, like that it came from outside. Because I told him the truth. He's like, well, what happened? I said, well, I threw my phone at my windshield. And he laughed, and he says, well, at least you told me the truth. And he says, normally people try to tell me, that something happened on the outside. And he's like, I can tell, I can tell by the way the glass. So important safety tip. But I saw a therapist just, once or twice a week. I can't remember. He knew nothing about the he was in a military town, but he hadn't served or anything like that. But I can tell you, just having someone, especially in that situation, that's kind of judgment free, and you can just say what's on your mind, is super helpful. and super therapeutic. And if nothing else, it can maybe open the door and encourage you to talk to somebody who, like you said, who has been there and done that. But
any help is better than no help.
That's right. Yeah. Fundamentally, it's better than the alternative. So
yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Well, on a brighter note from that, we do appreciate Greg coming on and sharing some of these just fantastic adventures, and you should definitely check out his book, because we really just kind of just the tip of the iceberg of things, and you really get some in-depth look at his time in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I still can't wrap my head around having a picture of yourself being shot down. That just blows me away. But anyway, we appreciate him. I appreciate you coming on with me this time, Kelly, and we appreciate all of you listeners out there. Just a reminder that the comments of our guests and crew are their own, do not represent the government or any private business. We appreciate you guys listening. Again, leave a comment or rating if you will, please. And we'll see you guys again in 2 weeks.